You just sent a text. 3 words. On my way. Nothing special. You didn't even think about it. But what if I told you that tiny, boring message just did something almost nobody on Earth actually understands? It left your phone. It bounced off a tower. A second later, it landed on a screen on the other side of the planet. You probably think it flew, up into the sky, off a satellite, back down again like a signal falling from space. Wrong. Completely wrong. What actually happened is stranger and, honestly, a little bit insane. Your text walked into the ocean, not as a metaphor, for real. Your 3 words became a pulse of light. That pulse dropped into a tube about as wide as your garden hose, and then it swam. Actually swam across the floor of the sea, past shipwrecks nobody has ever found, past mountains no human eye has ever looked at, through total crushing darkness for thousands of miles. And it did all of that faster than you could blink. Read that again? Faster than you could blink. Here's the part that should really bother you. We built an entire language just to hide this from ourselves. We say things go up to the cloud. We say a video gets uploaded like it just floats gently into the sky the moment you press a button. It doesn't float anywhere. The internet is not a cloud. The internet is a wire. One insanely long wire running across the floor of every ocean on this planet right now while you watch this. And once you see it, really see it, you are never going to look at your phone the same way again. So let's kill the assumption you've had your entire life. You think the internet floats, satellites, invisible signals riding through thin air. It's a nice story. It's also completely false. Right now, while you're listening to this, more than 99% of everything crossing an ocean, every email, every video call, every bank transfer, every secret government negotiation, every stock trade flashing between London and New York in a fraction of a second, all of it is crawling along cables lying on the bottom of the sea. Not satellites. Cables, hundreds of them, snaking silently across every ocean floor on Earth, doing basically all of the work while satellites, flashy, photogenic, famous, take basically all of the credit. So why has nobody ever told you this? Because you were never supposed to see it. Picture a beach, any beach, somewhere ordinary. Tourists walking across it right now, phones in hand, completely unaware. Buried just beneath their feet is a cable about as thick as a garden hose. Follow it inland and it disappears into a plain, windowless building. No sign, nothing that says this matters, just concrete and a locked steel door. Inside that building, the wire finally ends and an entire country's internet flows through it every second of every day without ever stopping to rest. That building has a name, a landing station. Here's a fact that should stop you cold. There are fewer landing stations on the entire planet than there are major airports. This literally critical piece of infrastructure is rarer than a place to catch a flight. Now follow the cable the other way, out past the shallow water, past the fish drifting lazily near the surface, down, down, past the point where sunlight even reaches, 2 miles down, 3 miles down. Down there, in permanent freezing darkness, under pressure that would crush a car like an empty soda can, that same simple-looking wire is still running, alone, unprotected by anything except its own thin outer casing, for thousands and thousands of miles. That right there is where your internet actually lives. Now here's where it starts to get genuinely strange. Crack open that cable, the one about as wide as a garden hose, and inside you will not find some enormous complicated machine. You will find glass. Threads of glass. Each one roughly the width of a single human hair. Sit with that for a second. That is the entire internet. Hair-thin strands of glass, sitting in total darkness at the bottom of the sea. So how, exactly, does information travel down a strand of glass? It's not electricity like you might expect. It's light. On one end, a laser fires a rapid pulse of light directly into the glass thread. That pulse of light bounces perfectly down the inside of the strand, over and over and over, without ever leaking out. Like a ball rolling endlessly down a perfectly curved pipe. Thousands of miles later, on the other side of an ocean, that same pulse of light reaches a receiver and gets turned back into your video call. Your email, your bank transfer, your entire digital life is just light blinking through glass at the bottom of the sea. But here's the catch. Light fades. Over that kind of distance, even light needs a little help to survive the trip. And this is the part almost nobody on Earth actually knows. Roughly every 60 miles along the cable, there's a small device called a repeater. Its entire job is to grab that dying pulse of light right before it disappears and slam it back to full strength. Here's the twist though. Those repeaters need electricity down there, under 3 miles of ocean, with no power outlet for 1,000 miles in any direction. So how do you power a machine sitting in one of the most remote places on the entire planet? You send the electricity down the exact same cable from land for thousands of miles, continuously, for years, sometimes for decades, without ever switching it off, not once. Sit with that for a second. Right now, while you're watching this, some quiet facility on land is pumping electricity down a wire that runs for thousands of miles under the open ocean, just to keep a few tiny amplifiers alive in total darkness, so a total stranger's video call can survive the trip. Nobody claps for that. Nobody even knows it's happening, but it never stops. Not for 1 second, not ever. So who's protecting something this important? You'd assume something this critical to modern civilization would be armored, guarded, watched around the clock by someone, somewhere. It isn't. For most of its length, that hair-thin strand of glass is just lying there, on the open seafloor, completely exposed, in the dark. And here's the twist people always get wrong. The biggest threat to the global internet is not sharks. That's the myth everyone repeats. Sharks barely register. The real danger is almost embarrassingly ordinary. A fishing trawler dragging its net a little too deep. A ship anchor dropping in exactly the wrong spot at exactly the wrong moment. On average, a cable somewhere on Earth gets damaged around 3 times a week. 3 times a week, part of the internet's actual physical body gets torn open. And when that happens, a specialized repair ship has to sail out to the exact location, lower a hook thousands of feet into total darkness, find a wire the width of a garden hose somewhere inside an area the size of a small country, drag it up to the surface and stitch it back together by hand. That is how fragile the machine underneath your phone actually is. One wrong anchor and part of a continent goes quiet. But before any of that darkness or light or electricity can even begin, someone first has to physically put the cable there. And that sounds almost impossible. How do you lay a wire across an entire ocean? You can't just toss a giant coil overboard and hope for the best. Special ships exist purely for this. They're basically floating factories, stacked with tanks the size of buildings, each one holding thousands of miles of cable coiled inside like a giant spool of thread. The ship creeps forward, barely faster than walking speed, feeding the cable out behind it inch by inch, day after day, week after week. Near the shore, where fishing boats and anchors are the biggest threat, a machine like an underwater plow buries the cable beneath the seabed, cutting a trench and tucking it safely out of reach. But once the ship hits deep water, 2-3 miles down, burying it is no longer an option. So the cable is simply let go. It sinks on its own, drifting through total darkness for over an hour, before finally, quietly settling onto the ocean floor. No burial down there, no protection, just the cable, alone, with the weight of an entire ocean pressing down on top of it. One ship, one route, one painfully slow crawl across an entire ocean, sometimes taking months to lay a single cable start to finish. And once that ship sails away, the cable is left down there completely alone. For years, for decades, working in total silence in a place almost no human being will ever lay eyes on. Here's a question you've probably never even thought to ask. Who actually owns this thing? You'd assume something this important would belong to governments, to countries, maybe some giant international body. Increasingly, it doesn't. The biggest tech companies on Earth, the exact same ones with apps sitting on your phone right now, have started building and owning their own private cables across entire oceans, not renting space on someone else's wire, building their own, from scratch, just to move their own data a little faster than everyone else. Think about the scale of that decision for a second. A company decided renting space on an existing cable simply wasn't fast enough anymore, so it built its own private route across an entire ocean, just for itself. That is how much this invisible wire matters to the modern economy. Companies you use every single day are quietly racing each other, ocean floor by ocean floor, fighting to control the fastest path for information on this planet. You never see the race, you just enjoy the speed. Now zoom out, all the way out. There are roughly 600 of these cable systems crisscrossing the world's oceans right now, at this exact moment. Laid end to end, they'd stretch more than 1.5 million kilometers. That's enough cable to circle the entire Earth almost 40 times over. 40 times around the planet, in wires you will never see, doing a job you never think about, so a single message can leave your hand and land on the other side of the world before you finished exhaling. And here's something wild. This didn't start with the internet. Back in 1858, the very first cable was laid across the Atlantic. Not for video, not for pictures, just for a telegraph. It took hours to send one short message, and the whole thing broke down completely within a few weeks. People treated it like magic, like witchcraft. What we have now is that exact same impossible idea, refined for over a century and a half, until it quietly became invisible, until it became boring, until it became something you never think about at all. And that, right there, is the real twist of this entire story. The thing that makes modern civilization possible, instant money, instant news, instant conversation across oceans, isn't loud or flashy or floating dramatically in space. It's a quiet wire, sitting in the dark, doing an enormous world-holding job with absolutely zero credit. So think again about that text you sent. On my way. It didn't go up, it went down. Down into the sand of a beach somewhere, into a windowless building with no sign, out through a tube the width of a garden hose, down past sunlight, down past pressure that would crush a car, across a hair-thin strand of glass, running for thousands of silent miles through total darkness, kept alive the entire way by electricity that never, ever turns off, until it finally surfaced again on a screen in someone else's hand. All of that for 3 words. All of that every single time you hit send. The internet was never really up there. It was always right beneath the waves, patiently, quietly, carrying your entire world across the bottom of the sea. So the next time you stand on a beach watching the waves roll in, remember what's actually underneath them. Not just sand and fish and old forgotten shipwrecks. Somewhere down there in the cold and the dark, a wire thinner than your finger is carrying someone's wedding photos, someone's last goodbye, someone's entire business, all at the speed of light, all in complete silence, all without ever asking for a single second of your attention. The ocean was never just water, it was always the wire. You will never look at it the same way again.